Honored panelists, distinguished guests in our YouTube audience, dear friends, welcome to this virtual parallel event for the 66th session of the Commission of the Status of Women NGO Forum. I am Johan Alva from Buddhist Tsuji Foundation, and I will be your host at this event focused on women at the center of sustainable and resilient food systems. Today, we're fortunate to have 4 exceptional representatives with us: Dr. Christina Tirado, Dr. Elizabeth Kimani, Ms. Lengisile Gianni, and Ms. Caroline Wimberly. Let us take a minute to introduce each of them. Dr. Christina Tirado is a member of the UNFCCC Research Constituency and advisor on climate and health for several UN organizations. Dr. Tirado's research focuses on the co-benefits of health, of climate policies, and the analysis of the integration of health around the UNFCCC work and the Sustainable Development Agenda 2030. She is a lead author of the IPCC Assessment Report chapter on health, as well as the cross-chapter paper on desertification published in 2021, and a member of the United Nations Women's Major Group. Dr. Liz Kimani is a senior research scientist at the African Population and Health Research Center, where she is leading the maternal and child well-being unit. She is also a public engagement ambassador and a human rights defender. She leads research to identify strategies to improve food and nutrition security. She has actively contributed to the development of national guidelines related to nutrition and child health in Kenya, including a baby-friendly community initiative and human milk banking guidelines. Ms. Lengisile Gianni is staff coordinator with the Tsuji Foundation in Zimbabwe. She is working with local volunteers to support the local community in a variety of ways, including by establishing great love gardens, where volunteers and community members grow vegetables to support the nutrition of their communities, in particular for orphans and the elderly. Ms. Caroline Wimberly is a food systems expert with over 10 years experience in international climate policy, specializing in animal agriculture. At Brighter Green, she managed projects for the Good Food Fund in China and helped develop the Food and Climate Alliance. She served as senior advisor on food and climate policy at 50 by 40 until November 2021, and is a co-founder of Eat for Climate Week in New York City and the youth-led Food at COP campaign. The work of food system transformation requires a whole of society approach. I'm excited to hear from these distinguished speakers as we deepen our understanding of the critical contributions and potential of women and girls in moving our food systems and communities toward resilience and sustainability. This event is in panel format. I will ask 3 questions where each of our panelists will have the opportunity to respond and reflect with us. After the panel discussion, there will be an opportunity for the panelists to answer questions from the audience. So please, everyone, as you're listening in to our speakers, feel free to write your questions for our panelists in the comment box directly in YouTube. I would like to start by asking Dr. Tirado, how have you seen the importance of women and girls in transforming food systems towards sustainability and resilience? Please keep your answer within 6 minutes. Dr. Tirado.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for the question and for the invitation. It is a real pleasure to be with you today. Some of the work that we have been doing in the IPCC is to evaluate all the references and all the publications that have been put forward in the last 7 years, right? So when we are taking any conclusions, that represents the results of an assessment through of the existing evidence. So what we have seen, and this is very interesting, is that by strengthening women and girls agency, but in promoting sustainable, diverse diets and resilient livelihoods in the agriculture and outside the agriculture, also in the transformation in the food system. We have been looking in long-term series and multiple variables And the results were showing that women empowerment through education and through food systems is key to empower women in addressing climate change impacts on nutrition. But that has been a constant in all the projects and programs that we have seen. If there is a component of women education, those projects in agriculture were addressing nutrition and the fact of empowering them, right? So these empowered women have increased climate resilience capacity for their communities for food security and nutrition. And that has been a very important conclusion. And this women empowerment has been associated with different cultural contexts, of course, and with higher resilience and adaptation capabilities that were lowering the malnutrition rates of their children and in general of the household. So, for example, studies that were using equal policies as key drivers on past reductions of malnutrition. And these were studies in 115 countries. We're looking at the economic and social institutional arrangements need really to facilitate this women empowerment and girls empowerment, and includes, of course, targeting men as well in integrated agriculture programs to change gender norms and effectively improve nutrition at the household level, right? And other aspects that we have been looking at were in the when addressing gender politics to access to food, because this was addressing not only adaptation practices, but also to improve dietary diversity. And one of the co-benefits that we have seen in working with agroecological practices, we have seen that women empowerment and agroecology are mutually supportive. So agroecology as a paradigm is challenging the gender dimensions of traditional agriculture and is empowering women to generate and control income. And this is critical because we have seen that in many cooperation projects and adaptation projects that were not considering the direct generation of income in the agriculture workforce when women were engaged is absolutely detrimental. It's just the opposite. These gender dimensions that are a challenge of traditional agriculture, we were seeing that empowering women to generate and control income is not only improving, of course, self-esteem, but decision-making power and leadership. How you invest your earnings, how you continue your business. So looking into the whole food system, we have seen that the transformation system is critical for women to generate this income. Anything that is transforming the primary production. Some of the aspects that we have seen is that promoting girls' education and keeping them in a school up to high school and longer is much productive that including any of the girls in the agriculture workforce. The same thing for boys, of course. So I think I will leave it there, and looking forward to this excellent discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tirado. It's really amazing to see how you've been able to tell from the research that the empowerment of women and girls has an improvement not only in the nutrition of the community, but also the sustainability and resilience of the food systems. Thank you so much. And next, let us hear from Ms. Gianni, who is working directly with communities in Zimbabwe to increase food security and provide nutrition for their communities. Ms. Gianni.
All right, thank you so much, and thank you to Dr. Caroline for the wonderful, to everyone who's here. So first of all, I'd like to start by saying that how I've seen the importance of women is that in Africa, and I think globally, women are the farmers, women, they produce the food, women, they sell the food, go to any market, vegetable market, we have the women, they are the ones who are in charge of maybe selling the food. I've seen how women are entrepreneurs in terms of agricultural production. I've seen how women, when we manage our families, we are already contributing towards shaping food systems. And I've seen how even when we plan for what we're going to plant, it's very important. Women have invested so much time in terms of agricultural productivity. I've seen women working in fields, and this is so much time that they've invested, and sometimes it goes by and maybe unnoticed because it's like the world wants to say, it's women's work. So for example, at food distributions, usually when you hold our food distributions, I've seen how we have over 90% of the people who come to receive food are women. And I've seen, based on personal experience, how I used to wake up early and we go to the fields to farm for our different families. For example, they say in developing countries in Africa, Asia, and the Pacific, women typically work 12 to 13 hours per week more than men, yet women's contributions are often seen maybe as invisible and unpaid. So I just want to say that it just goes to show the value or the contribution that women have made towards agricultural productivity. And because maybe they do it as part of their day-to-day activities as domestic chores, maybe that's why maybe sometimes it's not recognized. They also contribute the majority of the agricultural labor force in terms of small scale and subsistence farming. In Zimbabwe in the year 2019, for example, women constituted about 81% of contributing family workers in agricultural industry. That was according to the LFCLS report. So oftentimes, official statistics might not capture all the work, all the contributions that women have put towards agricultural productivity, maybe because it's in the garden, in the field, and in the household. So I would like to say maybe women are not fully represented yet. So which means maybe women have done actually more, but maybe we might never know if we don't put as much effort in towards trying to gain more knowledge on how women have shaped food systems. So I believe food security solutions, they lie within the very same people who know how to grow the crops. If they know how to grow the crops, then they definitely know some of the challenges that we're facing today, like food insecurity and environmental challenges. Women and girls, they provide food for today. Even if you were to ask even any woman in a rural community, when they are planning their meals, they're planning as well for tomorrow. So they understand the concept of sustainability, because when you're talking about sustainability, we're basically talking about how can you provide for today, at the same time providing for tomorrow. According to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, they say that if women farmers had equal access to resources such as credit, land, education, and extension services, these workers could increase their food production by 20 to 30%. And this will lift as many as 150 million people out of hunger and food insecurity. So that alone shows the impact women and girls have as being key to food sustainability and resilience. I've seen how through our Great Love Farms in Zimbabwe, we have these farms that we have, and we always have women. I would say maybe 95% of the people who come, or the community who come to take part in these community initiatives, they are women and they are girls. From all ages, 9 years, 15 years, 20 years, 85 years. So this just goes to show you how important women are in terms of shaping the food systems, because they're involved from the very, very beginning up until the very last stage. So it is very important that we involve these people who have been there when the food was being grown, who have seen some of the challenges that we're going to later talk about. And they know maybe how they've overcome them through the different systems that they have. So I think, thank you so much. That's what I would like to share from my side.
Thank you so much, Langisile. So yeah, as you're saying, I mean, the women are already the drivers of the food systems. And by empowering these women the way that you're doing and your organization right there in Zimbabwe could actually lift millions of people out of, or hundreds of millions of people out of food insecurity. So yeah, thank you so much for your contribution, Ms. Caroline. So yeah, how do you see the importance of women and girls in transforming food systems?
What a great question. And my comments are going to be a little zoomed out and less kind of from an on the ground perspective, but just from the answer being the simple fact is that women and girls just tend to make up a majority of the work that I've experienced, whether it's developing, kind of trying to develop a sustainable food systems network in China, in mainland China, to kind of doing research on deforestation and perverse incentives in Latin America related to industrial livestock. Women like doing the work, but either behind the scenes, mostly behind the scenes. It is mostly women, not necessarily. And you compare that to, who we see that are, tend to be ministers of agriculture or tend to be kind of on fancy panels at UN conferences. It's not necessarily, you don't see as many women for sure, and certainly not women from the global South. So that's going to be one of my key, spoiler alert, that's going to be one of my keys later on. Key solutions is representation. But yeah, with my experiences in international kind of food, climate and forest policy advocacy, it's just so dominated by women. Women really care about this, really like Huang Xile and Christina have already said, it's just so clear that women are so dedicated to these things, in addition to all of the other things they have to worry about and do. It's just so clear that women are the key to sustainable and resilient and feminist food systems, and depatriarchalizing. I don't know what the proper word for that is. Maybe one of the doctors can help me out. They're so key to this. So not that men and non-binary folks don't care about these issues. They sure do. But let's give women, props for being behind the scenes and doing most of the work.
Thank you so much, Caroline. It's really amazing to hear that. Apart from being the drivers on the ground when it comes to food security, actually, even in the research world, it's also women that are completely driving the development. Thank you so much. So last, we would like to ask Dr. Kimani for her experiences when it comes to women, the contributions of women and women in transforming food systems towards sustainability and resilience.
Yeah, thank you so much, Johan. So women really carry the burden. They have the inherent burden of care for their families, for their communities, and they actually are the ones feeding their communities and their families. And they are involved in every stage of the food system. They are, like in Africa, they are heavily involved in the food production. They are the small-scale farmers, and so they are involved in small-scale farming, and often they are subsistence farmers, and they produce the food through a lot of labor and all that, but they are actually the people who feed the communities. And I work in urban areas, and I work amongst the urban poor. But even these people in urban areas are being fed by these women from the rural areas around. And so there are women who now, there are those women who are involved in the production at the rural settings. But then there are also these women who actually transfer the food from the rural areas to the urban areas, and generally a lot of this food is being transported by the women. And then within the city, the women are still also just participating from transferring the food from the bigger markets to the smaller markets where the people live. And so I work amongst urban poor populations, and a lot of that, the women are really involved in trying to ensure that the people in the community are well fed. So so women in the family, women are the ones, because of the inherent burden of care for their families and for their children. Women are also the people who go for nutritional counseling when they are bringing up their children, and so they know about the nutritional state, how to feed their children well, and they would want to, in terms of food production, they want to produce the right food for their families, and in terms of buying the food, they want to be able to find the right food. But of course, there are many challenges. But so our food system, we know that there is a lot of challenge with the food system, and we are trying at the moment, we are talking about food system transformation. It is through these women that we'll be able to transform our food systems, because many times these are the people who are producing the food. And as I said many times, the women are small-scale farmers, and because of, they are also the people who go for these trainings to really see how to feed best their families. They are the people who also embrace these regenerative farming methodologies that we talk about in the food transformation. So I have seen that happen. Women doing a lot of agroecological farming wherever they are, rather than what we have known, this having the mechanized, heavily mechanized farming. And so we have an opportunity with women to transform the food system, because they are actually the people that producing the food. They are in a small scale way, but if we support them, they can be able to feed the families well, their communities, and they transform the system and regenerate our environment. So in my space, I'm working with women in urban areas, and we are supporting them. They already have formed groups, and they want to find ways of feeding their communities, and they are doing some level of innovative agroecological urban farming, and we are supporting them to continue doing that. So women will always look for ways of feeding their families, even in dire need, because in urban poor settings, really the issue of food insecurity is a major concern, but they will strive to find ways of feeding their families and their communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Liz. So what we're hearing from all of you is that these women farmers who may not own their land and may not own the production means for their food, they're actually far from powerless, or as people maybe in developed countries might think, that they are not very well educated in how to produce their food in a sustainable way, in a proper way. But actually, they are actively looking to improve their own situation, and they are really making progress. So this is really amazing to hear, and it sounds that if we're able to provide empowerment for these women, it will really make a huge difference for the communities as a whole. Thank you so much, all four of you. For the next question, I would like to ask, just following up on that, what are the challenges that you have seen in your work advancing sustainable and resilient food systems? And what would be some possible solutions? So let us start with Ms. Klengesile this time.
All right, thank you so much. I think we have already shared some of the challenges, and I think we would like just to start by saying maybe being a woman in this current world and trying to make a change is being seen as a challenge, or it might be a challenge which we'll later get into, considering the maybe cultural beliefs. So I'll start by saying that women and girls, we do not have the same equal access to resources such as credit and land, just like men. for example, if we're going to be saying we've changed the system, and maybe people say, or whoever is in charge says land is served on a first come, then you get the land. Already we're talking about how women are supposed to be at home. They are at home caring for the families. So who goes to get the land? Definitely is the man, because the man apparently is not tied down maybe by the family, by the children. So already it's a challenge. And if we're going to be talking about agriculture, if we're going to be talking about food systems, I think we should address the issue of land as well, because we need the land maybe to get the food. Accessing land and owning land are two different things. Anyone can access land, but can we own the land? Women are accessing land, maybe they're being left to say, go and do this in this certain, maybe go and farm this particular piece of land, but they don't own the land. I believe accessing land is different. If you own a piece of land, you have a certain power, the power which you're saying women need so that they can transform so many lives. Like, that certain level of power that women need so that they can change their lives, so that they can change the lives of their families. In Zimbabwe, for example, if you want to inherit land, you have to wait for your husband to die. So do we have to wait for our husbands to die so that we can get land? No, that cannot be a possible solution. That is if the family doesn't come and claim back the land, and maybe the woman is left with nothing. So imagine if we're going to be talking about child marriages, a girl is 15 years, she has maybe 2 children, and she has no land. And we're talking about how women are supposed to shape the food systems. And like we mentioned before, the woman is in charge of the family, the woman is in charge of the communities. How then do we address challenges such as this? There was a survey that was done it was done in 34 countries, again by the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. And they were saying in the 34 developing countries, women own less than 20% of the land. Yet we're saying more than 400 of them, they farm, they produce the majority of the world's food supply. So how do we address this issue, considering that female farmers, they lack equal rights to own land in more than 90 countries or even more, if we were to maybe dig deeper into these statistics? So how we have addressed this issue as Tsuchi is that we have acquired pieces of land. We've worked with the government, we've worked with local authorities in acquiring pieces of land, or what we call great love farms, and we invite the women to come and collect leave. So each one has their own bed, or each one has a certain portion, and they are in charge of that area, and the outcome they sell and they can benefit their families. As we provide, maybe in terms of what we provide might be the agricultural inputs, we drill the borehole so that they can get access to water. So some might say, no, this is not maybe a direct solution, but we believe we start bit by bit. Each journey starts with a single step. So if we can start by accessing these pieces of land, and women can be financially dependent, maybe later we'll be managed to get other pieces of land so that they can own individually. And which brings me to one of the other issues that we have tried to address, which is climate change. We cannot leave this out, because we're talking about how climate change has destroyed crops, how climate change has led to crops not maturing, maybe because of shortage of rains. So what we've done is we've engaged families in what is known as maybe zero tillage. In Shona, they say Pumbudza. So zero tillage is basically no tillage. It's an agricultural technique whereby we don't cultivate the soil until the crops have matured. And you can see how the huge turnout has been like, because the community, we have managed to recognize the huge role that the community has. We've stopped viewing the community as being hopeless, but they are coming through, and we just shared with them, and they share with us ideas. And you can see how in Masvingo province, for example, we started with less than 10 families, but to date we have more than 5 wards which have benefited from these initiatives. What they later do is they sit down as the community and they help each other maybe to save for this year, and then they sell the produce again on the market so that they can be able to provide for their families. So these are women, these are children, or these are girls who have come from a background which maybe some might say they have no physical assets, but they've been able to change their lives, transform their lives through agricultural productivity. But of course, we need to talk about the patriarchal culture and how that has been one of our biggest challenges. The belief that women are limited maybe to their own homes, yet it's not normal. And I believe that if what is happening today is a result of what society has been saying before, I believe we are the society. Each and every person out there makes up the society. So we need to start today. we need to start tomorrow. We started yesterday to encourage women to dream big, to dream beyond. Our founder says a woman's world is not within the boundary of her home. Equal to men, women are also entitled to serve the state, the society, the nation, and all mankind. So it is one thing to be able to change policies, but being able to change one's belief is also a greater challenge. So this is why I would say it's one of our greatest achievements, that we have empowered these women, and every volunteer out there is a role model for another woman out there. Maybe some might call the girl effect or the woman effect. Seeing another woman standing and taking charge and doing something, it ignites a certain passion in that other woman, because this woman is from the same community. They grew up facing the same challenges. They grew up going maybe to the same school, or maybe they all both dropped out of school due to the challenges that they face, but today they are making a change. So that is very, very important, and how that is how our volunteers have formed this network of women and girls who are now involved in agricultural productivity despite all the challenges that they are facing. Thank you.
It's absolutely incredible to hear how much you have done with your organization to empower these women to dream big and to really start to make a difference. Thank you so much, Ms. Gianni. Next, Dr. Kimani, Dr. Liz. What challenges have you seen in your work? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. So some of the challenges are what Gianni has talked about, but I'll focus more about in urban areas, because she has talked a lot to do also with the rural areas. And in urban areas, there is, so women are more involved in the distribution of food and also at the consumption level. And so at the distribution level, the challenges that women face a lot, we have problems with just accessing the food from the bigger markets to the smaller markets where they are redistributing the food. There are a lot of issues of security within that space. And there is also the issue within the market. There is the issue of food expiry, food going to waste. A lot of food expires, the food that they are selling, because they don't have preservation. They don't have adequate preservation equipment or waste systems. So a lot of that food, so they are going to at a loss. I mean, a lot of loss for themselves, because they are vendors and they have bought this food and then it goes to waste, but also a lot of food is going to waste. So those are some of the problems at the distribution system. And at the consumption level in urban areas, and I'm talking about urban areas, and I have done a lot, we are doing a lot of work in, let's say, Nairobi, and where 60% of the population live in informal settlements. So those are urban poor, the urban poor. So a lot of unemployment, a lot of issues with economic empowerment. So the issue of food insecurity within the household is major one, given the role of the inherent burden of care of women to feed their families. That's a major challenge that you're not, even if you're really struggling to feed your family, you don't have means of feeding your family. So some of the solutions to this, of course, we need support for these women, like at the distribution level, where I talked about their role in the distribution of food and vending of the food. We need efficient systems, transport systems for them to be able to transport the food across the different markets, and then efficient food preservation methodologies within their market, so that we reduce the food loss, and we also reduce their loss, so that they don't, I mean, at the end of the day, they are sometimes they don't even break even. So that's very important. At the household level, we need empowerment, economic empowerment, in ways that these women are able to feed their families. Of course, we can't talk, it's difficult to talk about all these things without talking about respect for human rights. And because food is a human right. It's really a basic human right, and many people are not able to access that food. So it's until the government, until states respect food as a human right, and therefore provide means of accessing this food for communities that are not able to access, then we cannot talk about a resilient food system. So really, we need respect for human rights. We need social protection systems that will protect the most vulnerable in these communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Liz. So yeah, these problems are definitely, as we can hear, even also in the urban areas, especially among the urban poor. And indeed, food is definitely a basic human right. And we definitely need the governments and the people in power to have that respect for these basic human rights. Thank you so much. Next, we have Dr. Tirado. What challenges and solutions have you seen in terms of sustainable and resilient food systems?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and thank you for the very interesting inputs that all of you have done so far. There is little that I can add, but I will add what I would like to reinforce some of the aspects that you have seen, and is related, for example, to land holding and ownership and inheritance laws, because women represent like around in low-income countries around 43% of the agricultural labor globally. But only 15%, not 20, but only 15% of the agricultural landholders are women. So it's even less than we think. And this gender and other social inequities, they also exist in non-land assets and financial services. And this is frequently due to social norms, to local institutions, and to, and this is very important, also related to COVID and to other aspects, inadequate social protection, okay? So for example, we are seeing that climate change has direct negative impacts on women livelihoods due to this unequal control and access to resources that could be land and credit. And also because they are very frequently the ones with least formal protection and social protection. And some of the aspects that we have been dealing with in adaptation, in climate adaptation programs and projects, is that sometimes these adaptation programs, if they don't really mainstream gender and women roles, they end up in being examples of maladaptation, right? So this, for example, the austerity measures that are like conditional to the consolidation of public services are increasing this gender-based violence, and also are bringing additional burden, this has been said, for women in the form of increased unpaid care and domestic work. And this is not what we want. I mean, these adaptation actions or programs, they don't have automatically positive outcomes for gender equality. This is something that we have to make very clear. And understanding the positive and the negative links of adaptation actions with gender equality goals is important to ensure the adaptive actions, that these adaptive actions don't exacerbate the already existing gender-based and other social inequalities. So, of course, all climate adaptation actions are grounded in local realities. So understanding the links with the different targets and indicators of SDG 5 is very important to ensure that these adaptive actions do not worsen existing inequities within society and leading to these maladaptation practices that I was mentioning. So some of the aspects that are critical is addressing climate justice, because this reinforces the importance of, and this is key, of considering the legacy of colonialism on developing regional and local adaptation strategies. For example, they are scholars that have been criticizing climate programs for setting aside, for example, forest land that poor people rely on, and appropriating the labor of women in the global south without any compensatory social rights. And now I am happy that you were addressing those issues, and without compensatory of social policy and rights, both of them. And women are expected to work with the non-timber forest products to compensate for the lack of logging and for global climate goals. But they are their work, or our work, on social reproduction and care is paid little attention. So these differences between women in the north and the south is critical to address them. Also, there are aspects looking into more globally speaking, okay? So there is a global ecologically unequal exchange. This is called also biopiracy, or damage from toxic exports, or even the disproportionate use of carbon sinks and reservoirs by high-income countries, which are enhancing the negative impacts of climate change in women in least developed countries, and for example, also in small island and developing states, which are enduring the hardest impacts of the debt crisis that is imposed due to the imposed debt measures in their countries. So it's also, you know, from the global point of view, there are many issues that we have to address as well, as it will be the equal participation in decision making, in policy making, in the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, in science. There is a lot of work to do to have an equal representation of women in decision making and science panels and consensus and national planning committees, etc. So yeah, I leave it here, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tirado. Yeah, so definitely there's so many these inequalities extend throughout all sectors, as we can hear. I mean, both globally and locally, and I mean, without really putting this into consideration in all our actions, in particular in our adaptation actions, to avoid that our adaptation becomes maladaptation. And we'll definitely not be able to have the kind of impact that we're wishing for. So thank you so much, Dr. Tirado. Last we have Ms. Wimberly. Caroline.
Hi, thank you so much. Okay, yeah, I'm on, sorry. Yeah, so gosh, I agree with Christina, like so much has been said already. Just some maybe policy level things to add. I would say one of, if not the most biggest challenge to, to sustainable food systems is that the policies that are meant to improve our food systems, whether it be yields or just different, whatever it may be, they're mostly gender blind. And that's really, really troubling. I know the EU has, made a commitment to have a gender lens to everything, but even some of their recent stuff that they've come out on forests doesn't have a gender angle. So, and just as an example, like at COP26 in November, It was like a flurry of announcements. It was like announcements palooza, of all of these commitments and kind of like fancy ceremonies. And when you went and looked at the details, because I went and investigated, the actual, like the small print for all of these announcements, and just like one or two even just mentioned the word gender or women. It was really, really kind of shocking that it just something as important and substantial and one of the SDGs, gender equity, like it just isn't addressed in current kind of forest, nature, food, agriculture related policies. So the lack of having a gender lens at all is the biggest issue. Another one I see from my focus on livestock and animal agriculture is that really industrial livestock and industrial agriculture in general, regardless of if it's animals or plants, and especially with industrial livestock, is especially challenging to women because women farmers tend to be smaller scale, right? You don't see that many mega farms owned by women. It's just not based on the way whatever you want to say, patriarchy, societal roles, et cetera. So when you have kind of this, we have some of these national level policies, let's just say in some Latin American companies, for example, that are really incentivizing cattle ranching or incentivizing more and more animals on less and less space. That's coming from a very like US and European model to try to make it more efficient and to use less land per se to grow more animals. But these have so many side effects. For one, like local pollution is one that or gendered health impacts from pollution. For example, some peasant communities, I think in Paraguay, have experienced increased levels of breast cancer that's been linked to agrochemicals from nearby soy plantations that are genetically modified and mostly for export to the to European and Asian livestock to feed livestock in those countries. So there's just all of these kind of consequences that aren't sold at the beginning as this is this great modern thing we're doing. We're going to have all these factory farms and put all these animals in these sheds, and it'll be great for your economy, and you'll have more and more meat, and everything will be wonderful. And that's not the narrative, or that's not the reality, I should say. So policies relate, gender blind policies that don't consider concentration of land ownership, and what happens when rural areas are depopulated, the social services that women tend to use more, they disappear. So yeah, I would just say there's a lot of issues with, especially with industrial agriculture affecting women for sure.
Thank you so much, Ms. Wimberly. Actually, I was curious because you mentioned a number of challenges. Would you happen to have any solutions for it?
Well, gosh, that just goes nicely into what the solutions might be, isn't it? Yeah. So instead of kind of prioritizing, I'm not saying there's everything pushing for more intensive operations is bad, but instead of, let's say, that being the go-to, is that we need to be more, we need to farm more like the US and Europe, because those are the most efficient places, instead of having that kind of very very Western and very problematic and patriarchal viewpoint. We can prioritize resilient, diversified, community-led production, right? Communities really, we're talking about, women most of the time with community. So especially directly supporting women-led peasant collectives, or instead of kind of this top-down approach, that's really at the mercy of global markets. I mean, I don't need to say what's going on with global food security and, relying so much on these handful of crops to serve, global food markets. We're seeing that being a bit problematic right now, to say the least, in addition to other awful things. But let communities and let women determine the best seeds, breeds, practices to sustain themselves and their communities. They're going to use less resources. They're going to provide better nutrition, and it's going to celebrate culture. Come on, like win-win-win, like let communities be self-determining instead of like imposing this kind of like Western patriarchal, you must operate with these outputs and this, with these with these two, seeds, you need to, be providing for your community. So I would say, yes, giving more control and resources to communities, and that includes development banks. Development banks fund the heck out of industrial livestock and industrial operations. How about supporting smaller peasant women-led collectives? I think that would be huge.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Yeah, so bring the power back to the community. And I mean, you were mentioning that also biodiversity within the agricultural biodiversity, which is another huge aspect, as you just touched very lightly on. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, all four of you. This has been extremely interesting. So for the next question, this will be the last question before we take some questions from the audience. So I'd like to call on the audience, continue to post questions. We have a few already, but please continue to post questions for our amazing panelists. So I would actually like to continue to ask you, Caroline, so moving forward now, how can we work together to promote the participation of women in creating a sustainable and resilient food system for all?
Well, I think my sister's male cat, unfortunately, has decided right now to start demanding something. So look at this male intervention in this gender women
terrible.
Of course, this happens right now. So I need to attend to the male cat at some point. But yes, so yeah, what can we do, right? Again, very broad comments in addition to what I said earlier, and focusing on trying to give power and access and infrastructure to women-led initiatives. I've heard that many times from different groups of women farmers and researchers, that access to markets is huge, and gender inclusive policies. But yeah, I would just say on a really overall kind of broad level, giving more opportunities and voices to women and girls and anything, food systems, what have you. No more manels, no more male, pale and stale, unless that cannot be avoided for some reason. Like, just representation is really important. And so if you have any kind of decision-making power, if you're looking for a job, for a speaker, you could have your own policy for things that a certain percentage need to be women, or need to be from the global South, or need to be women from the global South, or need to be some sort of underrepresented community. And I would just say that the campaign I'm working on right now, Food at COP, is a youth-led campaign for sustainable food at climate conferences. We want to make sure that that these huge climate conferences with thousands and thousands of people, where tons of food, is given out, we want to, call attention to that food and say, like, what food is being served? Like, where is it coming from? What is it predominantly made of? Like, it's important to set these examples and this, symbolic gestures at these huge events where these, huge decisions and negotiations are made. And a lot of those participants are women. One is a young girl named Romina Paulette from Kenya, who is 16 years old, 16, can teach me a lot about networking and and getting stuff done. She's amazing, and we have a lot of like wonderful young women that are part of this campaign. And just I think women have to be more innovative in general because of less opportunities. So there's just more interesting, I don't know, there's just more interesting things that can come when you have less resources and opportunities. There's more like invention. But just, yeah, I would just say to improve representation in whatever way you can. No more manels. I'm just saying this to the ecosphere. I'm not saying this to anybody in particular, but yeah, that would be my suggestion.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for bringing up also these huge climate conferences that are not always very environmentally friendly in the way that they run and so on. So I'm very happy that this conference, Women at COP, this conference is actually fully online. So we're reducing a lot of travel through that way. And of course, we're putting our finger on a lot of very, very important aspects. So thank you so much, Ms. Wimberly. How about Dr. Kimani? Can you share your point of view of how we can work together to promote the participation of women in food systems?
Yes, thank you so much. For me, we are talking about food system transformation, and we are talking about climate justice, climate issues. I would say, for me, I would want to promote farming as a way of life, as it used to be, and not this industrialized system where. So I would want to promote the farming as a way of life and the way it was, and so supporting small-scale farmers to really continue producing food in sustainable ways and to regenerate our environment. And I would not just say we want to just have women farming. I would want to promote this across the gender. So I would really also deal with issues of gender relations and gender issues in the food system. And so inculcating this culture of farming, I would start with the young children, boys and girls, and really reinculcate that culture so that people see farming as a way of life and as a way of feeding themselves, way of feeding their families, and way of feeding their communities. And when we come to support, I would also say we support both across the system. So like youth, in Nairobi, we are working with youth who are men and women and women groups. And so having different across gender, really appreciating the culture of farming and seeing this regenerative farming as a way of life and as a way that they would want to be engaged in is really important, so that we don't just have men just being interested in the industrialized farming and women are the ones who are doing the sustainable, this regenerative farming, agroecological farming. We want to have this. And so we also reduce the burden from the women. So we are feeding our communities together. So that's for me what I would want to say. But more, I can't forget to say that we still want to respect food as a human right and supporting communities to be able to feed themselves in dignity. So we would want to support in terms of inputs where women and other people want to be able to be involved in food production. We support in inputs. We also want to preserve the food that's already been produced. We are talking about protecting our environment, protecting the issues of climate change, abating those. So really we would want to ensure that we are preserving the food that's already produced. So even in the market, having food, good storage and preservation approaches and supporting communities to be able to do, women and other people who are distributing this food and vending this food to be supported. So for me, I would approach it from that perspective.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Liz. So we're actually talking about the change of mindset on all levels here to bring in this sense of respect, both for the food itself and for the entire process of production and transport and the whole chain of the food system. Thank you so much. That's very insightful. Thank you. Next, we have Dr. Tirado.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And yeah, how powerful all the aspects related to the right to food and how women could be leading these aspects once that the right to food is included in a constitution. So thanks for addressing that. Basically, there are many possible solutions, but not only one, of course. But what has been said about to put efforts in changing this unequal power dynamics and to foster inclusive decision making in the case of climate change adaptation in agriculture or in whatever programs we are looking at. This is critical to have a positive impact in gender equality. So participation, promoting participation in environmental decision making usually tends to favor men, groups like men and Anglo-Saxon men, and where this is in local environment committees or in international climate negotiations, or even in the IPCC work. So these efforts to have this gender equality are critical. And there are some examples there in which there is a successful integration of gender and social inequities in, for example, in climate policies. And addressing vulnerability or climate change vulnerability and questions of social justice. And there are, for example, some examples in India in very well established social protection that include cash and food transfers, such as, for example, the universal public distribution system of cereals in India, okay, or pensions and social grants in Namibia. And this has been, they have been demonstrated to contribute towards relieving immediate pressures on survival and improving gender sensitivity. Okay, so we have seen that a combination of strengthening the adaptive capacity and resilience through these integrated approaches that include social protection are key, including disaster risk management. Microinsurance are critical for women. Microinsurance is like the key word that I see more and more in publications that are protecting women from extreme weather events. And this link to ecosystem-based climate change adaptation, or the so-called nature-based. This is something that particularly when this is taken at the same time of a gender transformative framework can work. And there are many case studies in different countries looking into that and showing that. So, for example, looking into the gender transformative and nutrition sensitive agroecological approaches, they can strengthen both the adaptive capacities, but also to enable more resilient food systems and increasing women leadership. Okay. For example, there is a piece, I think is one of the best examples that we have seen on integrating gender issues in social protection, is the social adaptive protection in the Sahel, which is an integrated approach to resilience that promotes the coordination among social protection, disaster risk management, that includes risk reduction and insurances, and climate change adaptation. And this has critical measures that can improve the status of women and girls, like including health, education, nutrition, family planning. This is critical, among others, right? So yeah, and just to finalize and to mention that the inclusion of reproductive health and family planning in these social protection programs has demonstrated to really provide a lot of freedom and independence for the girls, and they're really making and to realize that the girls are finishing high school. So this is something that we have to consider, that is important, this education and access to family planning and protection. So just to finalize, is true what Caroline was mentioning about the European climate change adaptation strategies that are weak on gender and other social equity issues, right? But for example, we also have to show the good ones, like in Australasia, there is a lack of gender responsive climate change policies, but in many other places in Asia, there are several countries that are recognizing this gender vulnerability to climate change. And after, the policies tend to be more gender specific, and they have a focus on targeting women. And for example, all these national action plans on climate change in India or in Malaysia, they are addressing these issues. And we should remember that these gender strategies for climate adaptation planning exist, and they have been drafted in most of the countries, and now they need to be implemented. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. So we can actually see a lot of progress being made. It's just not fast enough. That's really amazing to see. So last but not least, I would like to ask Rengistile, what about you? What would you say in terms of how we can work together to promote the participation of women in creating a sustainable and resilient food system for all?
Thank you so much. I think most of the solutions have been stated, so I'll say, maybe I'll just add on to what has been said. I'll start by stating the very obvious, that there's a reason why there are more than 7 billion people in the world, which means that we weren't born in this world to be alone. So which means whatever solutions that we're going to have from now on, they should try to represent each and every group of the different people that we have. So which means women should also be there. So which means we hope we won't only find women in small scale farming, in subsistence farming, but we also hope to find men sitting behind the desks, sitting in those big offices as well, in terms of policy making. So we hope to find more representation or more women at each and every level that has any influence in terms of food sustainability. And I'm grateful that we have all these different institutions and all these amazing speakers that we have today, showing all the ways that we have tried to be a bridge for all the women from the different areas that we are representing. So it goes back to the issue of us making sure that women of all ages and groups, I'm grateful that Caroline talked about the 16-year-old. It shows that all of us, we have something that we can contribute. We have different solutions. I'm grateful also to Dr. Kimani for how she has shared about the different experiences that she has, as well as Dr. Tirado. So it is very important to share knowledge, because we have all these different ages and they are sharing knowledge from different aspects. For example, in our farms, we have one of our youngest volunteers, she's 9 years old. And the eldest on the very same farm, she's on the very same maybe piece of land, she's 84 years old. So when these two come together, they're sharing their knowledge that they have, which then brings me to the indigenous knowledge systems, how it's very important, like what Dr. Kiman said, that she hopes to find farming the way it was. Indigenous knowledge systems should still be incorporated. I believe that knowledge is not just limited to science. There's so many things that so many women out there in the communities in the different countries, they know. And I don't think now we don't have time to be experimenting with new solutions. We should, but we also should try to capitalize on what people know. on how the different farming methods that they were using before, they didn't need much money. They were environmentally safe. For example, using the ashes as fertilizer. It's something that we can still take into account and try and maybe add a little more modern knowledge to try and account for that. And then we have the issue of how more than 25 years ago, we have the governments around the world who pledged to change or remove their existing unfair laws at the Beijing Platform for Action. So it's important to involve the leaders. I know that they say that they acknowledge that the laws were not fair. So 25 years later, we are still trying to address some of these challenges. So already we need to address this, and how the involvement of leaders, I don't care, maybe it's community leader, maybe it's national leader, but all these leaders, they are very important in changing these policies and these legislations. For example, in Zimbabwe, we have certain maybe areas, communities where they trust so much the chief, the traditional chief. So what we have done is we've worked with these traditional chiefs and try and encourage the traditional chief that maybe the chief that, okay, how about you stand today and say, when you're allocating land, also allocate for the girl child. So this is using their traditional leaders to try and change the belief systems that are there. If they trust their chiefs that much, how about we use those chiefs as our words of mouth, as our modes of communication to try and encourage more women or more men to try and be held accountable in terms of empowering women and girls, which brings me maybe to my last issue about how we should also
so I think that we lost Ms. Giannis. So let's come back to her in a little bit. So I mean, what she just shared was already really incredible about this 9-year-old volunteer sharing knowledge with the 85-year-old volunteer who they both have their own contributions to this community. And in particular, the indigenous knowledge that is right there in the communities and is many times held by women. So these are truly crucial points. Thank you so much, Hlengisile. So let's go on to the Q&A, and hopefully Hlengisile will be able to come back on. So for the Q&A, we do have a number of questions from the audience that I would like to bring up. So one question is, how can we empower men to do unpaid care work and share the mental load for providing survival care for the family? Who of you would like to take this question? Feel free to just unmute yourself. Actually, I would love to hear Dr. Liz. Oh, thank you so much. Christina.
Thank you. If Liz was going to make sorry, I could not see. Liz, go ahead if you wanted to make a contribution. I just wanted to share many of the programs and projects where we work with, they are called He for She, okay? And they are amazing. They are related to equality, gender equality. They are led by very young youth, from 14 years old and up, and it's He for She, protecting women, thinking in equality, looking into family planning and respect, education. I think that there are many opportunities to work this way. And now, just to say that these programs that I was saying that were so effective in protecting climate change and environmental natural resources around communities are led by women and men, by couples. So working with couples is critical. And I think that these programs have shown that they are so effective, because there are men and women together working together. So I hope that this responds to the question. Over.
Thank you so much, Christina. Would anyone else like to add on to that? Not, I'll move on to the next question. what concrete farming solutions to minimize the argument of the difference between men and women to take up physically heavy work? This is another really good question. Klingisila, are you back? Would you like to talk about this part?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry for connection is a bit bad. So I think maybe just to support maybe what Dr. Tirado just said, the he for she, because if we have the women being the ones who are maybe on the receiving end, we should also hold the perpetrators accountable. So it's important that we have the men and boys as well, like I said, maybe involve the boys from a young age, teach the boy from a young age, or teach the man as well to try and take into account that this woman is a human being, like what Dr. Kimani said, food is a basic human right. So if it's a basic human right, like what was once said, that women rights are human rights and human rights are women rights. So we need to recognize that women, they have rights, and women are human. So we need to teach people, maybe teach the men, teach the boys, teach the leaders as well, to input maybe legislation, to put in measures that will help in trying to take into account such measures. If it's at community level, let's use the chiefs. If it's maybe in Africa, in the rural communities, if it's the urban level, let's have maybe legislation or maybe policies that are friendly for women to be able to be on the better side in terms of maybe these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. I would actually like to follow up with you, because I know that in the Great Love farms that you have, men do work and do the heavy manual work right next to the women. Have you found it difficult to encourage men to join the farms? I know you're saying that the vast majority of people working on the farms are definitely women. So I would love to hear a little bit more about this.
Okay, I think, yeah, we have, but I'll show you a story of a local counselor we've been working with. So the local counselor, whenever we do the heavy work, he also comes to join in. When he joins in, because a leader, by virtue of him or her being a leader, there's a certain influence that they hold. So that counselor being there doing the heavy work, you find we have more men coming in to also help. So I think it goes back to what I said, that when a leader stands and the leader's mindset is for women empowerment, there's a certain change that we can achieve. So that has been one of our greatest assets as well, including the leaders. We have the chiefs calling on the men as well as the women. Since maybe they have not yet reached a stage of maybe acknowledging a woman's voice, they'll acknowledge the men, and gradually they'll end up acknowledging the woman's voice. So we try and use any opportunity that we have been given. So if it's using the leaders, be it a female leader or a male leader, to spread the word, that has been how we have managed to have more men recognizing the important roles that they can play at the Great Love Farms.
Thank you so much. So when you're whether male or female leaders, when they see the kind of impact that the work has for the community and the benefit to the community, when more women are empowered, they have a voice to make a difference. Thank you so much. That's really awesome. The next question: how to empower mothers working in food systems to empower their own daughters? I think this is a beautiful question. Maybe Dr. Liz, would you like to share with us your thoughts on this one?
For me, I kind of feel that, I still feel that we need to really empower both gender in this food system, so that it's really not, I don't want to make this to be like a women thing. I want it to be embraced across gender. And for me, I would embrace a system where both boys and girls see this from both of them, they respect this whole process of food system, and so I would say, for me, maybe that's the question you had asked earlier is a question that maybe I'm answering now. And I would say through our education system, like even primary school across the whole education system should promote this, should promote this gender-sensitive system where not women are just overburdened with the whole food system work. So I don't know how to answer the question of just focusing on daughters. So I would really want to see the whole system change. And that's why I'm saying we should start from the time, even when the children are born. So if we work with the mentality that this, the farming, the food production, the food system is for both gender, and we should all embrace it and really make it be involved in sustainable, regenerative food system across gender. Then as children grow, they will have that in their mentality, and it will not just be a burden of the women or the daughters. So for me, please excuse me from that answer. I have not thought about it that way.
I think that's a wonderful answer. This should not be a burden on the women only, but this is actually a matter of parents teaching their children rather than only mothers teaching their daughters. Thank you. I think that is a great way of framing it. So for the last question that we'll take right now is, let me see. I'm sorry, actually, that was the last question. Thank you so much. And this is perfect because now I would like to give you all an opportunity to give us a take-home message. So what would you like for the audience that are on YouTube right now to bring home from this event? And if you don't mind, I would like to start with you again, Liz. Would you like to share your thoughts on what the audience can bring home from this event?
Yeah, for me, I think what I have been thinking is about really bringing back the regenerative food system into our lives and reinculcating that in our lives. And so I would say I would want to promote that. I mean, I would want us to promote that regenerative food system or food systems in wherever we are and across gender, so that at the end of the day, we have sustainable food systems. So, so I know that we still have, as women still have the burden of care. I mean, that is, it's inherent, and we can't remove that from women. And so we really still need to support them to be able to play that role. But we also need to recognize the role of men and really encourage that role of men in the system so that we embrace this together. In that, we also want to encourage systems or policies that also encourage men to be carers. So even as we talk about child care, taking children for clinics and all that, for men to also be able to participate in those, like nutritional counseling that happens, so that they can really see. So the food system is from the production to the consumption, but if people understand at the consumption level that people need to eat good food, healthy food, then we will be able to eliminate these issues that bring unhealthy food in our system, and everyone will be able to embrace that. But I can't forget the issue of food as a human right, and I would want to encourage policies that promote food as a human right, and so states respecting food as a human right, so that I know during this COVID period, there was a woman reported, and that's just one, I mean, it's just one case that was reported in media, but it's many women could be doing that. Women cooking stones for their children because they don't have anything to cook. They have nothing to cook and they want to show, I mean, because of the burden of care they have, they are trying to feed their families. And this woman was cooking every day, boiling stones. The children gets get tired, and I mean, they go to bed because they are sleepy, the following day happens. So really, we want to have food as a human right respected by states, and measures put in place for social protection measures.
Thank you so much. Yeah, food as a human right, and this is something that we can all influence our leaders, our politicians, to change their mindset when it comes to food. Thank you so much, Dr. Kimani. Next, I would like to ask Ms. Kimberly. Caroline, what would be your take-home message for the audience? Please keep it at 2 minutes. Thank you.
Yes, sure. Yeah, I think what Liz just touched on is really huge, and let's not, let's keep in mind how kind of earth-shattering that concept is in our, the current, globalized capitalist system we have, to say that food is a human right. Very threatening to a lot of people with a lot of power and money. So I'm not to say, of course, I agree, and that's something we should push for. But also recognizing that is, we're talking about huge systemic change, and I think we're all working towards that, right? In our different ways. I think we've been talking about that. So I think we need kind of the little changes and the big, while we're working on the big changes too. And that points, Johan, to your question earlier about, like, how can men be more supportive, or how can women who are in food systems, get improve opportunities for their daughters. I think it's just, I'm not going to pretend I understand what it's like to be a small farmer with several children, because I don't, but I can only assume that anyone, whatever little thing you can do, whatever little thing you can have control over to try to make it more equitable, more, have women in more places, or have more opportunity. I know that's kind of like such a blah answer, but just whatever what you can control, because we can control so little sometimes, while we're pushing for that huge, food is a human right.
That's wonderful.
And nutritious food is a human right. Nutritious food is a human right.
Very
Christina,
good. Very
that
good.
was for you.
Nutritious food as a human right. And yes, any one of us, we have whatever power we have, and that power we can use at whatever level we are at. Thank you. That's very inspiring. Thank you. Helen Sile, what would you say would be your take-home message for our audience who are here today?
Okay, thank you. I think just taking over from what Caroline said, the lead that we have. So which means when we're here today with this platform, we're standing for women and girls that cannot be on this very same platform. Maybe we cannot expect everyone to be able to share their voices, but whenever we're given these opportunities, we should try our best. Like what everyone did today, it was amazing. And it is important that when we go back to our respective places, now we act on what we have said, we build up on what we have said. We have had so many conventions before, we had so many treaties, but we hope we can have more action, so that we can finally see something coming to life. So I think this one now is to invite everyone. Like what we have said before, this is not just a woman's problem, a girl's problem. It is everyone's problem. Because if it is your girl child who cannot have the life of a dream, then it becomes your problem if you are the man, or if it's your wife, or if you're the parent. So this is an invitation for everyone to join us in every little way that we can. And this is also to say thank you to all the women and the girls out there who have been working tirelessly. And this does not mean that women have not been doing anything. It actually shows from what we have said that women have been at the center of sustainable food systems, and we're still at the center, and we're still going to be at the center. But because there's been this invisible curtain that has been trying to cover up all the efforts that women have been contributing. So now is the time for the world to finally maybe wake up and realize that no, women should be given a platform. And maybe some of the challenges that we have in this world is because we have been limiting women, and we have been creating this glass ceiling for women and girls. So it's important that we use this opportunity, we use each and every day of our life, or each and every second, to try and change in whatever way we can, be at community level or at policy level. We all coming in from different perspectives. So I'd just like to start by ending that we are all projects of women and women who lived before us, and today we are living because of that. So we are responsible for each and every human being out there, directly or indirectly. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Lengisile, for that wide open invitation for everyone to make a difference in this. Thank you so much. And last, I would like to ask Dr. Tirado to give your takeaway. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for all the comments that have been made. And I wrote a little note in the chat. I don't know if the whole audience can see it, but these aspects of the gender perspective that is not centered only on women, on men, but is looking also at the structures and relationships of power between and among groups of men and women is critical. So to look how gender, particularly in its non-binary form, is intersecting with race, with class, with socioeconomic status or education is critical. And now coming back to education and to the right to food, just to comment that in the US, through the school feeding programs, this is an amazing way of implementing the right to food, right? So during the COVID time, all these school feeding programs were feeding Los Angeles and many other cities. And that was a very natural way of implementing, normal way of implementing the right to food without calling it, okay? So this links with some fears that should be not look at that, but as an opportunity. And these school feeding programs have been keeping girls from marriage, and they ensure education, and also this link to the increased access to reproductive health and family planning services that are contributing to climate resilience, to socioeconomic development, and to health through improved health and well-being for women and their children is critical. So in some, addressing all these inequities that were discussed before in access to resources, to social protection, to assets, to services, and together with the participation in decision-making and leadership, it is essential to achieve gender equality and climate justice. So I will leave it there. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Christina. So yeah, I mean, these inequalities definitely go beyond gender, and we need to address that whole range of inequalities in order to truly have climate justice as well as food equality. Thank you so much. So if we wish to build resilient and sustainable food systems, we can tell from everything that has been said today that it's essential that women and girls are at the very heart of this transformation. And in many ways, they already are. So thank you so much, all speakers, for these wonderful stories, examples, and discussion points. We've seen so many benefits. So let us bring these takeaways back to our own communities. And I think, as was pointed out already, if we take action, each and every one of us can be a part of transforming our food systems into something that is both resilient and sustainable. So I'd like to thank all of our panelists so much, Dr. Tirado, Dr. Kimani, Ms. Gianni, and Ms. Wimberly. And not least, thanks you to our wonderful audience. Wish you all an amazing day, evening, or night. Thank you so much, and bye for now.